Rijkjesfontein is the venue for our 4th edition of Stable Talk. And the man we're going to be chatting to today is 5-time South African champion trainer Geoff Woodruff. Now, Geoff relocated here about 2 years ago, and since then the stable fortunes have escalated to the point at which he's now back in the top 10 of South African trainers. Great to have you on Stable Talk.
Thank you, Jim. Nice to be here.
If we look back at your career, you've been involved in racing now for what, how many years?
Well, really giving my age away, but it's actually 40 years now.
So it didn't start here in South Africa?
Not at all. I was 26 when I came here. I actually got a job with Ralph Rickson, and I worked for Ralph for 6 years, and Carol and I got married, and I took out my license in 1988.
Did you have a fairly strong backing from patrons in those days?
I did. Owners from Ralph gave me the odd horse, you know, it was just to give me a bit of a sort of start in life. And there was Johan Spieth and Tolly Novik. In fact, Tolly didn't have a 2-year-old to give me, he had a yearling. He said, I'm sorry, I've only got a yearling, Geoff, but you know, she's quite nice, do you want to have a look at her? And there stood Star Effort, and she stood like, as a yearling, she stood taller than the 2-year-olds. She was a beautiful filly. I said, well, thank you, Tolly, I'll wait for her. She was a little superstar, you know. She raced 11 times. She won 10 times. 5 grade 1s and a grade 2, unbeaten as a 3-year-old.
Other horses that you had during that time, the Pas de Croix would spring to mind?
Of course, he was a very, very good horse. Super, super horse.
Then, of course, there was the big move to Johannesburg, prompted by Tony's going to Hong Kong at that particular time.
Well, I'll never forget, I was actually in bed. It was about 10 o'clock in the evening. The landline rang at home in Cape Town, and it was Abe Swirsky. And he said to me, Geoff, Tony's been asked to go to Hong Kong. I said, really, Mr. Swirsky, that's nice for him, you know? He said, no, you're going to have to go to Joburg, you know? And that was it. So I went to Joburg.
But why the Vaal specifically, or was Tony at the Vaal?
Yeah, well, Tony was at the Vaal. It probably still does have the best training tracks in the country. They're superb. It's on like 70 feet of silt, so they're beautiful tracks.
And you trained some very good horses there. I mean, you started with, of course, Jetmaster that you took over from Tony.
Yeah, well, El Pitcher was there, Jetmaster. When I think of all the, you know, good horses that we've had since we've been here, Eventual, Catalucci, Candidato Roy, Promise from My Heart, I mean, there's an endless list, Yardam, you know, they all did very, very well from there.
Why then the move to Rijkjesfontein? What really prompted that?
They had opened up a new coal seam on the other side of the road, and when you start wiping coal dust off your desk, you've realised that your horses are breathing this stuff in, so I think it was impacting very negatively on the horses. I had decided that really we need to get to Rijkjesfontein where the air is so much better.
Looking at your results over the last season, from your personal perspective, satisfactory?
They are. Statistically, I think we're probably the highest percentage runners to winners.
Well, you've got a couple of stable stars at the moment, and undoubtedly top of the list must be the filly. Do you remember what she did in the July? I mean, you must have been enormously gratified, not only because of what she did, but where she came from.
I bought her mother, festive occasion for Michael, and she was a lovely looking filly at the sales, and she turned out to be good, you know, and she wasn't big. And then eventually, you know, she won the Oaks, and she ran a couple of seconds in grade 1. She was a good filly, very good filly. And Michael sent her to Silvano, and in walked this tiny little thing, and I thought, oh my goodness, wish you were like 2 hands bigger, you know. That was Do You Remember? And so
well, I don't know why we're standing about in the feed room here. Let's go and look at her.
Yeah, let's go and see her.
Geoff, she's not quite as tiny as I might have imagined, but I suppose in that July field, she must have looked a midget.
She was the smallest one there, Jim, by a long way. We actually weighed her. She weighed 428 kilograms for the race. I mean, it's like nothing, you know. She's a very little girl.
I mean, it had to be the performance of the race.
Well, I thought so. Look, we had a good draw, which was a big help. I think Robbie rode an absolute model race on her.
Yeah. Now, small horse, now you're faced with big weight?
We got lumbered a bit. You know, when she won the Woolhavington, she sort of shot up to 106, and she only won it by a short head. You could say even a pound less, she may have won the July, but or one merit rating point less on paper, but of course it's run on grass. I think the crux of it is, though, if we had to take on Cherry on the Top again at Turfentine, Standside, 2,000 metres, and give her weight, I don't think anybody would be battling us to beat her, and that's what it means. So it's going to definitely compromise her for the Summer Cup, although, you know, that's just one race. But remember, that's for 2 million rand. It's the sort of race that you don't avoid if you can help it.
Have you earmarked anything for her at this stage?
We've got the Paddock Stakes, we've got the Met, and we've got prior to that, of course, we've got the fillies races here.
Okay, well, the horse that was unlucky, everybody thought, not to make it into this year's July was Talina. Let's go and have a look at him and have a chat about him.
Okay, for sure.
Geoff, was there any thought in your mind that he might not get into the July?
No, not for 1 minute, Jim. You know, one expects a horse that's like run places in all three legs of the Triple Crown to at least get a run in the July.
Talina has won the Benningbrook Gauteng Guineas in a humdinger, in a thriller, in the first leg of the Triple Crown. It's Lovestruck. Talina's trying hard as they go to the line in the South African Classic, and it's close.
It now leaves you in a situation as to where do you go from here, and where do you go from here? What are the plans?
Summer Cup, Jim. You know, one thing about it, he at least has a merit rating that we can work with now. So we'll work towards that as his first goal, and you know, possibly or probably the Metropolitan as well. He'd be well weighted, I think, in the Met. So he'd go pretty much the same route as Do You Remember?
Well, like her, he's by Silvana. Have you had a lot of Silvanas?
Quite a few, and I really like them. They're lovely horses to work with, and they're very honest. They seem to stay well. I think he's a great sire.
Well, who else have you got in the lineup for us?
Well, we can go and have a chat to Yorker, as long as he doesn't eat us in the process.
Geoff, fairly typical of Jetmaster's progeny?
I think very much, Jim. He's probably the closest looking to Jetmaster, especially his face and his markings, his blaze. And of course his size, you know, he's quite an impressive looking horse.
You had quite high hopes for him, obviously, going into the July, and things just didn't seem to map out all that well.
I've still got high hopes for him. I think he's a very good horse. I believe it all came a little bit soon, and sadly, he doesn't really look like he suits Greyville.
Yeah.
And unless they're going to run the July somewhere else, it's not going to work that way.
For backers, would you say that, you know, if they're going to follow him, better on a galloping type course?
I think so. Look, he won in emphatic style at the Vaal, you know, with its 1,000 metres straight. He sort of picked them up and, you know, spat them out there.
Yeah, well, I mean, he disposed of them in a few strides.
He did. I must say, you know, I had high hopes for him on Gold Cup Day. I really thought he would have a good chance of winning that, but I don't know. Maybe we're asking a horse that's not quite ready to walk on the water. He's a 3-year-old. He carried near to top weight, and it was a tough ask for him.
An end tie, and that, of course, can always be problematic going into the future, but so far so good.
I think provided you know, that he remains honest, he will remain intact, but we'll see. We'll try and do what the right thing is for the horse, that's all.
Well, you're a handsome chap, so behave yourself. Otherwise, you know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Geoff, the feeding of horses has probably changed even during the period that you've been training.
Never changed for me, Jim. I've actually fed Millard Cube from day one.
Really?
And when I worked for Ralph Rickson, we fed Millard Cube.
Now, Terence's involvement with EPOL went back a long, long time. Why do you think he was so keen to propagate the use of cubes?
He needed a consistent feed the whole year round, just a consistent protein. And, you know, to the point where, you know, he spent a lot of his own money to develop this whole thing with EPOL on blood tests, and he proved that the protein dropped with the work if the protein intake wasn't sufficient. Together, they basically invented a cube, and it's a pellet today. It used to be a much bigger cube, but it was consistently 16%, and I think it probably changed the face of feeding horses in this country.
It was called the Millard Cube after Terence.
It was, because he's essentially the inventor of it.
And you've got the consistency, it's reliable.
That's the point. Totally reliable. You know when you buy the Millard Cube, it's a 16%. When you buy the Gold Cup, it's a 14%. We use both. Everything is what it says it's supposed to be, and I'm not punting this for Iqbal's sake. I'm just saying that it's a very, very easy way to feed, and a good way.
Price-wise?
Very competitive. There are, I think, cubes out there that are not as good and more expensive. And I have experimented with a lot of makes. You know, one always tries to improve one's game, but I've found nothing yet that will compare.
Today's helpful feeding hint is brought to you by EPOL in the interests of excellence in equine nutrition. Studies in Florida, USA have shown that feeding 500 grams of dampened lucerne chaff about 30 minutes prior to work assists as a natural buffer against acid irritation. This is because lucerne contains natural calcium and magnesium buffers, saponins and mucilages that stick to the upper stomach wall and protect against such irritation.
Well, Geoff, hopefully in time to come this could become known as the Walk of Fame, because you've got some horse flesh here that a lot of trainers would be very envious of. I think. Who's this fellow?
This guy is a 2-year-old. He's a Danehill dancer out of Umfoin Mare. Belongs to Marcus Jooste, and we bought him at the Melbourne sales last year. He can be anything. He's going to stay, that's for sure, and we're just starting to get busy with him now. We've got a horse chestnut this side here, a nice horse, you know. He came off the second Cape sale.
I've got a feeling that horse chestnut is actually going to start coming to the fore in this country. What do you feel?
Well, I think so. I imagine like that whole Sadler's Wells line is wrong for America. And, you know, let's face it, Fort Wood did very, very well in South Africa, and no reason why horse chestnut shouldn't follow in his footsteps. This is another one, is a Rock of Gibraltar.
Australian.
He's an Australian, yeah. And he's a beautifully bred horse. He's got Fastnet Rock sitting in his third dam, so really could be anything. Anyway, yeah, this is another Oz. This is Astronomer Royale, and he was champion miler of France, so I hope he can produce something. This guy doesn't look too bad. He looks like he's going to run. Nice Coltachi in the making, Dynamite. He's just here.
He's by?
He's by Dynasty. Out of a very, really, it's a difficult female line to work out because it's American pedigree, and you just don't know what you're going to get. They're a bit of a lucky packet, but being a Dynasty, I hope he stays. I think he will, and if he does, he'll be a very good horse. I think he's smart. He won very, very well. A winner's race, actually, first time out. Virtually hands and heels with his ears pricked, so it was a good one. This is a nice horse. This is a Western Winter colt. It also belongs to Marcus, and I think he'll be quite useful.
They're very quiet generally, the Western.
I love them, yeah. I think they were just about born with saddles and bridles on there. So they're so clever, they just seem to know what to do. Beautiful horse.
So he'll step out when?
In the spring. I think everything will
most of them you're just waiting for the
get the bad ground out of the way and get the horse sicknesses done. Everything's done, so when you do you get ready with them, you can carry on, you know.
Oh, exciting time.
It is, and a lot of work to be done, but I'm very, very happy with our string, and you know, I just hope that we can do something for our owners this year.
Well, that was Geoff Woodruff, one of the most amenable men in racing. Always a pleasure to spend time with Geoff chatting about his horses. You can join us again on Stable Talk in a fortnight's time, but in the meantime, don't forget that you can catch us on YouTube.